If you watched our previous video on Daveigh Chase, you already know the broad contours of a life that deserved far more than it received. A child who voiced two of the most beloved animated characters of a generation, who terrified an entire decade in a horror film, who quietly faded from an industry that had taken everything she had to give and then moved on. What you may not know, what most people don't know, because the full details only emerged in the days after her passing, is exactly what her final weeks looked like. Her father, John David Schwallier, spoke directly to the New York Times and NBC News in the days following her death on June 16, 2026. Medical reports from the Los Angeles hospital where she spent her last days have been confirmed and published by multiple outlets. And what they describe together is a timeline that is, in the plainest possible terms, one of the most preventable tragedies I have ever had to research for one of these videos. This is not a video about blame. It is not a video about the controversy surrounding her death. We are deliberately setting that aside in favor of focusing on her. It is simply the full, accurate, carefully told story of what happened to Daveigh Chase in the final weeks of her life. Because she deserves to have that story told clearly, and with the care that she was not always shown when it would have mattered most. To understand how Daveigh Chase ended up in a Los Angeles hospital in early June 2026, you have to understand what her circumstances had become in the months and years leading up to that admission. She was 35 years old. She had last worked with any regularity in the entertainment industry years earlier. The career that had made her famous, the voice roles, the film appearances, the Disney Channel series and direct-to-video sequels that had kept her working through her teens, had wound down over time, the way careers in that industry tend to wind down for performers who break through as children and are no longer quite the right fit for the specific roles that made them visible. What her father and those close to her have confirmed is that her final years were defined by real, serious instability. She had experienced a painful estrangement from her family. She had struggled to find consistent housing. By the time she was admitted to the hospital in early June 2026, she had been living unhoused in Los Angeles, without stable shelter, without the kind of consistent access to food and medical care that most people take entirely for granted. She was severely malnourished. That phrase, severely malnourished, is clinical and clean in a way that can make it easy to absorb without fully registering what it actually means. It means that for a sustained period of time, Daveigh Chase's body was not receiving the nutrition it needed to function. Her immune system, starved of the resources it requires to fight infection, had been systematically compromised. By the time she arrived at the hospital, her body's defenses were already critically weakened before any infection had even entered the picture. That is where her final weeks began. In early June 2026, Daveigh Chase was admitted to a Los Angeles area hospital. The admitting condition was severe malnutrition. The medical team's immediate focus was on stabilizing her, reintroducing nutrition, beginning to address the physical damage that prolonged malnutrition causes to major organ systems, and assessing what else might be going on in a body that had been operating under serious physical stress for an extended period. In isolation, malnutrition, even severe malnutrition, is something the medical system knows how to treat. People recover from it. Given time, given the right nutritional support, given a stable and safe environment to recuperate in, many patients admitted in Daveigh Chase's condition would have had a meaningful chance at recovery. But malnutrition does not exist in isolation, and what her body was carrying underneath the malnutrition, what the compromised immune system she arrived with left her completely unprepared to fight, was already beginning to develop. The infection that would kill her was coming, and her body, already stripped of its defenses, had almost nothing left to stand in its way. While under medical care in the hospital, while doctors were still in the early stages of trying to stabilize and treat her malnutrition, Daveigh Chase's condition took a sudden, aggressive turn for the worse. She was diagnosed with bacterial meningitis. For those unfamiliar, bacterial meningitis is an infection of the meninges, the protective membranes that surround the brain and spinal cord. It is one of the most serious bacterial infections a human being can develop. In a healthy individual with a functioning immune system, bacterial meningitis is a medical emergency that requires immediate, aggressive treatment, and even then, it carries a significant mortality rate and can cause lasting damage to those who survive it. In someone whose immune system had been severely compromised by prolonged malnutrition, bacterial meningitis is something else entirely. The standard defenses that a healthy body uses to slow the progression of the infection, the immune response that buys time for antibiotics and treatment to work, were simply not there. Her body was fighting on an empty tank against something that required everything the immune system had to give. Medical experts commenting on the case in the days following her death were consistent in their assessment. The severe malnutrition that had brought her to the hospital in the first place had directly compromised her ability to respond to the meningitis. The two conditions were not separate tragedies. They were one connected chain, each link making the next one more inevitable. By June 14th and 15th, the bacterial infection had crossed a line that, in medical terms, changes everything. It had breached the bloodstream. Bacterial meningitis that spreads into the blood becomes septicemia, a systemic blood infection that, when left unchecked or when the body lacks the resources to slow it, triggers a cascade of system-wide failures. The bacteria multiply in the bloodstream, they release toxins. The body's inflammatory response, designed to fight infection, becomes so overwhelming that it begins damaging the body's own tissues and organs. This is septic shock, and it is the leading cause of death from bacterial meningitis in the most severe cases. Daveigh Chase's medical team by this point knew what they were facing. The family has confirmed that doctors warned her condition was terminal, that she may not have much time left. Those words, in clinical settings, carry a specific and terrible weight. They represent the moment when treatment shifts from, "we are trying to save you," to "we are trying to give you as much time and as much peace as we can." She was 35 years old. She had been in that hospital for less than 2 weeks. On Tuesday, June 16, 2026, the blood infections that had been spreading through Daveigh Chase's body triggered full-body septic shock. Multiple organ systems began to fail simultaneously: the liver, the kidneys, the cardiovascular system, overwhelmed by the combination of the infection, the toxins it was producing, and a body that had arrived at this moment already depleted and weakened beyond what almost anyone understood at the time. The medical team could not reverse the damage. Daveigh Chase passed away in the hospital. She was 35 years old. Her 36th birthday would have been on July 24th, 5 weeks away. The news was first broken publicly by the person who had been with her in her final days. Her father, John David Schwallier, confirmed the full medical timeline in official statements to the New York Times and NBC News in the days that followed, speaking not out of any desire for public attention, but because he wanted the record of what happened to his daughter to be accurate and complete. She had come into the hospital with malnutrition. The malnutrition had stripped her immune system. The stripped immune system had left her unable to fight the meningitis. The meningitis had entered her blood. The blood infection had caused septic shock. The septic shock had caused organ failure. Each step followed from the one before it, and the step at the very beginning of that chain, the malnutrition, the housing instability, the circumstances that brought a 35-year-old former child star to a Los Angeles hospital in that condition, was the one that with different support and different circumstances might never have happened at all. I have spent time with a lot of difficult stories in making these videos, and this one is among the hardest, not because of the medical details themselves, as stark as they are, but because of what sits underneath them. Daveigh Chase did not die in an accident. She did not die of a sudden, unforeseeable illness that strikes without warning regardless of circumstance. She died of a chain of medical events that began with malnutrition, with a body that had been systematically deprived of what it needed to survive over an extended period of time, in one of the wealthiest cities in the wealthiest country in the world. She was not a stranger. She was not anonymous. She was someone whose voice is embedded in the cultural memory of an entire generation, someone whose work has generated enormous amounts of money for the institutions that benefited from her talent when she was a child. The question of what she was owed by the industry, by the institutions, by anyone who made money from the characters she brought to life is not a comfortable one. It doesn't have a clean answer, but it is a question that her story demands we ask. In the meantime, if there is someone in your life who has faded from your view, someone who was once close and has gone quiet, who you've wondered about but haven't reached out to, let her story be the reason you reach out today. Ohana means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. Rest in peace, Daveigh Chase. Your story deserved a different ending. If this video moved you, please share it. Not for views, but because her story deserves to be heard fully and accurately. Take care of each other. I'll see you in the next one.